Okay, cool. I just turned on my mic, so you guys are here. I'm broadcasting and recording to the internet, so things you say might be picked up on my mic. Just FYI. So if you don't wish to be recorded on the internet for all time, be silent. If you don't care, then talk.
Let's use like a voice feedback enter.
Yeah, there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, cool. So if you are watching
this really cool series, I didn't know. Maybe like, have you heard of Mr. World Cup?
Yeah.
Have you watched it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's so cool. I think I started watching it yesterday.
Oh my god. I'm so jealous of you.
Yeah.
I already watched it. I'm gonna watch it again.
So good.
I still remember. Oh my god, it's so good. The grand finale, the season finale is so good.
Yeah,
It's so good, and then postpone it a week because something happened in the news that week, and it's like too similar.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, man, that's like our season finale. We can't have our season finale tonight.
all right, let's do it. What do you guys say?
Yeah.
Cool. So we have one person, at least on the Hangout. We might have a couple more, and this is recorded. I don't expect a whole lot of more folks, so we've been kind of small lately, and this is an esoteric topic. So I want to do quick intros, talk about RailsSchool, and then why did I say 7:30? No, 8:30. I need to wrap up a little bit early tonight, so by 8:30 or so. We'll see where we are. Like if we're deep into something that'll stretch a little bit longer for a good breaking point, we'll stop. Normally we go to 9, but I have a good friend moving to LA, and tonight's the last night I get to see her, and I'm gonna go say bye. Yeah, I know it's sad. LA is a terrible place. I'm joking, but it kind of is. Cool. Yeah, anything south. Yeah, it's all sort of like this is marginally acceptable. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we're gonna talk about Elixir and Plug. First, introduce myself. I'm Brad.
Change sets and plugs.
Yeah, plugs are weird. Cool. I'm Brad. RailsSchool teacher for a couple years now. I'm self-taught. I learned late in life, and I'm a mostly Ruby on Rails programmer, JavaScript, of course. I'm a consultant, which means I hop around in lots of different projects, which is kind of cool. I don't often take deep dives into stuff, and I actually, unfortunately, though, can't use Elixir in my day job, although I really want to. I mean, also, I think like a lot of people are starting to think, how can I? And I've been building a side project in Elixir and Phoenix off and on for about 3 or 4 months now, a learning experience, and it's been really fun. Oh, cool. I had a really good time. And Josh, by the way, we are doing East Bay RailsSchools in the Berkeley Public Library, which is super cool. And also I'm doing on July 19th, I'm doing a talk at the East Bay Rails meetup. And I actually want to start doing Phoenix classes in the East Bay. So that's cool. If you guys are wondering, I'm talking to Josh here, who's hanging on the Hangout, and we're talking via the whiteboard, and you can log in by going to the RailsSchool website class page, and then there's a link that says show whiteboard. The internet is Noisebridge. Cool, awesome. So that's pretty well met, Josh. RailsSchool, we've been doing this for 3 or 4 years. The model is sustainability, so we don't have an agenda. We kind of teach random ad hoc things. I'm doing the class tonight because I think Elixir is cool. I'm doing a code walkthrough. Most of the time we do kind of code alongs, but code walkthroughs are a little less stressful and intensive for the teacher, to be perfectly honest. And especially with something like Elixir, it's been fun. Also, I want to get feedback on this approach I took because I might libraryify it or submit it to, I have a blog post about it. I might submit it to the Elixir radar. So if you guys have thoughts or want to contribute or something like that, we're looking forward to that. That's actually what I hope to do in the East Bay classes too. So let's do quick intros. We have two folks here,
Yeah.
and I know you. So what's your name though?
I'm Manuel Abello. I'm from Madrid.
Manuel. Okay, cool.
And I know nothing about programming, so this is my first my first experience with it. But I'm really excited about it. So let's see if I can get something.
Cool. I think you will. Awesome.
My name is Michael Chavez. I am a consultant. I started my own company called Space Rocket, and transitioning from being like WordPress to Phoenix Elixir, and kind of having my own framework for clients work out of WordPress. So being a custom suit tailor from being in Ross Dress for Less, I guess.
Sweet. Cool, man. Have you used another like MVC framework other than WordPress, or are you going WordPress Elixir?
I mean, I've messed around with
Just curious.
JavaScript frameworks, Angular, Ember, Elm, for backend. Yeah, just Node.js and Express. Been kind of in the JavaScript ecosystem, but now I'm like, I got my JavaScript front end ready. And now I'm like, I need to connect to a database, so I go to some Phoenix as a best candidate. It's kind of between that and Python almost. If it is a couple years earlier, I would have chosen Ruby on Rails. It seems kind of late to get into Ruby on Rails. You haven't been in it for like 5 years already.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think that's fair. I mean, I'm sort of interested in Elixir and Phoenix because I've been using Rails, and Rails is still like so awesome and mature. Like, if you tell me this needs to actually work by a deadline, I'm gonna probably choose Rails. But I think that I'm using it because Elixir and Phoenix is fun, but also because I think that in 5 years, there's a fair chance that it will be as stable and mature as Rails is. A lot of the people involved are Ruby and Rails people. It seems to have learned from a lot of mistakes and improved a lot of stuff. So
that's the main deal. Like, these people have
already been down that road.
For 10 years, and all the downfalls, and now are doing this greenfield language. So
yeah, it's super cool. Okay, cool. So so we got one guy who knows Elixir. Josh probably doesn't, which is cool. Josh, let me know if I'm wrong. So I'm going to do, we'll do a quick thing about Elixir, but I don't want to waste a whole lot of time. Elixir is you're going to hate me, but you can think about it like CoffeeScript for Erlang, which is not, it's totally not technically that at all, but it's a nice way to think about it. Erlang is a language developed by Ericsson in the 80s to program telephone switches with. And Erlang is really interesting because it does a lot of things that are really useful for writing web applications. The first is concurrent, right? So it handles concurrency really well. Unlike Ruby, which is very hard to do things on across multiple cores, Erlang does like concurrent programming very nicely, a lot like Go. So that's super cool. And we definitely want to be doing concurrent programming these days on the web. The other cool thing, which is related to concurrency, and this is, I think, amazing, and we're not going to go into this as much today, but it also is distributed. And so if you go through, I really encourage you guys, if you are interested in, and I'm not sharing my screen on the Hangout, so I should probably do that. I'm just talking. So I'm going to pull up a tutorial here. Yeah. This is super cool. Check this out. So we have this. We have these nice tools for concurrent programming, like processes can receive messages and pass messages to each other, right? And that's how we can do concurrency. So if we have one process here that's maybe like listening for something to happen, and a second process that is like receiving messages, you can start up a shell and like pass messages from one process to another, right? That's super cool. You would expect that to happen. but you can go to a different node on the same local network, start a shell, and pass messages back to those processes also the exact same way. So Erlang and Elixir will scale across multiple processor cores and across multiple machines in the same network in the exact same fashion, which is super cool. So you can write an Elixir or Erlang script that works the same on your single core processor versus a distributed global network with no changes in code. It works identically, and that's amazing. And then this thing, they starts at the end. He basically starts two processes, and someday we should do this. I can start up a process on my machine, hand you the process ID, and you can just send a message right back to it. Yeah, how cool is that? That is utterly unique, I think. So it doesn't. So that's pretty cool. Erlang and Elixir are also functional languages, which is a kind of a neat way to think about writing programming, which I think probably lends itself better to testing and things like that. It's loosely typed. There are no strong types, so there's no like declaring something's a string or an int. Which is different than Haskell. What was the other thing I wanted to mention about Elixir? And I'll just look it up. Elixir has all those nice Erlang things plus a Ruby-like syntax, which is super cool, and an ability to do metaprogramming. And finally, Erlang has a VM, so it's like Java compiles to bytecode. Which, yeah, that's a good question. So, boy, I don't know if I'm even.
It's a bunch of math.
Yeah, so it's metaprogramming is a way to write code that writes code. So, for example, with Rails, let's say you tell Rails, I have a database table. I've got customers and they have all these fields, right?
Yeah.
Well, in Rails, you get a customer class. And each object has like a first name method, like like I can do like Brad.firstname, and it's actually going to like figure out what to do. The fact that that first name method is defined at runtime is a bit of metaprogramming. So there's code in Rails that's like, cool, give me all the table names, please. Every column name, I'm going to dynamically define a method. That's one example of it. It's often used to write what are called DSLs, which are domain-specific languages, which are really common to Rails. So Rails migrations. But to be honest, that's a really good question, and I feel like I'm struggling a bit to give you a good. Yeah, it's like you write code that dynamically defines other code. That's a really good deep dive. I don't want to get sidetracked, but that'd be like Ruby metaprogramming. If you're not familiar with Ruby, I think metaprogramming is one of the maybe hallmarks of the language and a big feature of Rails. So it's worth like 20 minutes just to see what the fuss is about.
Okay, so metaprogramming is something that came from Rails.
No.
But it's more prevalent.
Ruby allows metaprogramming, and Rails takes heavy advantages of it.
The term is used a lot. It's used more. So I had never heard of it.
Yeah, here we go. So here's a little bit of example. We're actually using send. So a classic thing in Ruby is like I might have an array of strings, and all those strings are actually method names, and I can loop through those and actually like send my object that string, which calls a method on itself. So there's some pretty cool, Lisp, I think. Anyway, so Elixir's got some cool stuff. It's got metaprogramming, which means we can have DSLs, which means we can have a nice testing framework. It means we can have nice semantics for writing migrations. And it basically, I think the take-home point is it lets us have some nice syntactic sugar on tasks that might be complicated in another language, like writing a test suite, things like that. And I'm going to flip back to this whiteboard here to make sure I can answer any questions from people at home too. Okay, cool. And then so everything we talked about before was Erlang, Elixir as metaprogramming, Ruby syntax, and some really cool tooling like mix, which is sort of like the Rails command. So Elixir takes a really awesome language for writing web apps, Erlang, and adds a lot of the really great things about the Ruby and Rails ecosystem on top of that. And easy syntax, it's especially easy for Ruby people to grok and learn. DSLs, right? So we can easily do tests and things like that. And really awesome first-class tooling to write tests, to install dependencies, and take care of all that crap. And that's really awesome. And you know, I've been writing, you know, JavaScript a lot lately too, and it's also, it just feels so refreshing too. It's like there's one thing, it's thought out, it works. It's a lot nicer in a lot of ways than what Rails is, and we don't have to worry about it changing every 3 months.
You don't have to worry about the shortcomings, the snakes in the grass.
Yeah, and it also it just feels more.
You know, the only thing I don't like about Elixir
What's that?
is the I'm gonna use the percent sign and the bracket.
Yeah.
It's like way over there.
It's hard to type. Yeah.
Shift and hit 5. You know, and there's like no auto completion. So you have to do like shift 5 and then.
Oh, I can't. Yeah, I don't.
Bracket. No, then like you have to do like the equal sign. Whatever.
I don't think I have auto completion.
Yeah, it doesn't have auto completion.
Yeah, that'll come though. That'll come.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So any questions about Elixir? Functional, concurrent programming language, that's super fast. And the other thing about Elixir and Erlang is that it basically can have 100% uptime. It has an ability to have process supervisors that will restart processes. So what you can do with this is you can build a distributed message processing framework that's incredibly fast, that's concurrent, that scales horizontally incredibly easily, that also can instantly and dynamically recover from process failures and even hardware failures. So you can have like a data center just go down, and your processing architecture will just like magically route stuff around that. Just like
that's actually one of the best parts of it. Is,
it's pretty
so
simple.
crash like go through
Yeah.
It says exist and crashes, right? But you can still go back. It's like it doesn't crash. If one user crashes a socket, like it doesn't affect anybody else.
Yeah,
That's,
Erlang's great. I mean, it's been running our phone system for 30 years.
that's the reason.
Yeah, and it turns out that a lot of the problems they had to solve, right? Concurrent distributed processing, you know, the ability to have 100% uptime over decades, are the same things that we want with, especially Internet of Things and the web now. It also with Erlang, you can do hot code swapping, so they could actually, you could update a telephone switch running Erlang with new Erlang code without rebooting it. Cool stuff like that. So I'll leave that as an exercise to the listeners to dig into Erlang. But the thing that's going to be most important for us is the functional aspect of it, right? All this other distributed stuff is going to be nice, but we're not going to dig into it. And in particular, in the context of Phoenix, which is a Rails-like web application framework for Elixir. So let's, okay, cool. So I'm going to keep going here. If you have any questions, let me know. So what we're going to talk about is how I wrote an authorization framework in Elixir for Phoenix. And I want to lay the groundwork. First of all, it's not, this is authorization, not authentication. I like to keep these things separate. Authentication is who are you, right? You say you're Brad, give me the secret password to prove you're Brad. That's authentication. Happens like once, you sign it. Authorization is cool, you want to do this, Brad, are you allowed to do that?
Oh, okay.
Different.
That's permission.
Yeah, exactly. Permissions, yeah. Sometimes people combine, they can be combined in web apps all the time. I like to keep them separate.
Always, yeah, I always look at
Yep, no problem.
Things are.
They're
those are two different things.
Yep, they're closely intertwined. They're two different things. Also, I like to use. I very much like a Ruby on Rails library called Pundit, and I like Pundit for a couple of reasons. One, it's extremely lightweight. Two, it has like nothing to do with the authentication bit, so it's completely separate. It's easily testable, and it's declarative. And when I say declarative, it means you can use it in a declarative programming style where you kind of like write like on one line, like user Brad can do X, user Brad can do Y, right? Simple. So you get repetitive, but it sort of has statements. So as an example here, let's look at Pundit here. Let's just get to some Pundit code. Okay, I will show you Pundit code. Okay, so this is Pundit code. For each controller action, we have a method that returns true or false. This one's not doing anything interesting. It's just letting any admin user do anything. So let's do, here we have something that calls a method called correct user, and that just does a quick comparison. So the point here is that we're specifying our rules for who could do what in a declarative way where we write one rule per controller action. Keeps everything really simple, right? Every time a user asks to do something, the app knows to look and find that rule, and that rule says true or false. Simple, easy, has nothing to do with anything else. And this is totally different than how a lot of people handle this kind of task. Some people will write complicated functions and metaprogramming and things like this. I like this. No, it's not dry, it's repetitive, right? But I like this. This is what I call declarative programming. Make sense? So that's what I'm trying to build, something like this. I want to do this in Phoenix. Cool. So I'm like, I'm sure someone's done this. No, they haven't. All of the Phoenix-based authorization libraries were closely tied to authentication and or implemented patterns that I don't like based on another Ruby library that shall not be named.
Maybe check out what is it called? Train Fixture. It's called. His name's Train Fixture. That's his GitHub name.
No, I don't know. So can you guys see that? Probably not. Okay, cool. But you know, maybe we'll. Okay, we'll use Vim and stuff.
Oh, yeah, add it. Yeah. Train Fixture add it.
No, I don't. Is that an author? Is that for?
It's kind of more of like a library. It does like the whole thing for you.
Cool. For Phoenix.
Phoenix, yeah.
Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, you know, I don't know. I don't know if I looked at that.
Users, registration,
Exactly. Too much.
Too much.
In my opinion,
Yeah, that's why
icky. Yeah.
Guardian.
Yeah. So I implemented. So my app currently implements authentication with Guardian, which is an authentication library for Elixir, and that's taken care of. So I already have current users. I already can find those things. Cool. So so I built this with Plug, and I'm going to struggle a little bit. This is a lot of material, especially for folks who are new. But Plug is pretty sweet, and we can just kind of dig into maybe even how I set this up and then look at some code in a bit. Plug is a system of composable modules for web applications. What Plug is it's a set of rules and a library that implements those rules that allow people to write modules, plugs, that can be composed together and used in an Elixir web application. And that you can do some interesting things with that. Ruby has something really similar called Rack, which is a similar set of composable modules, and they use that to implement the adapter pattern between Rails and different web servers. Right. So here, maybe I'll draw. So sorry, I'm going to draw a picture, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So here we have your app, right? Here's a happy Rails app. Doing happy things. It's going to be any app. And here we have a web server, and this is let's just say Apache, because everybody's heard of Apache. And this thing is the thing that's like actually listening on port 80, right? Handling all that stuff. Your Rails app is not doing that. Your Rails app is not actually handling HTTP requests. Your web server is for you. And the problem is you need to write your web app to talk to Apache, right? because Apache gets this request and it's like, yo, I need you to do something with it. So we have to, and then Rails has to be like, cool, Apache, here's something back. Let's say we swap Apache out and we go with Nginx because we heard it was cool. Now we have to go back into our Rails code. We have to change all this little linking code here, and that sucks, right? What if we could do something? Here, can you toss me that eraser? What if we could do something that's like, and then smart people are like, oh my god. So I'm going to write a piece of code that knows how to talk Nginx and Apache and Rails, right? And this is my adapter. And then I'm like, future Rails developers, you just need to talk adapter. If you can speak my adapter language, then you can swap in all these different web servers to your heart's content with no code changes. Super cool, right? So this is a common pattern when you want to abstract out like a cloud storage service, where anything where you might want to swap out. A really famous example of this is Active Record with databases. With Rails, you can swap out databases like Postgres or MySQL without having to rewrite your code, and you expect that. And it's because Rails knows how to talk to all those different things. So in Rails land, rack is that adapter. Rails apps speak rack. They get requests from the web from rack, and they speak rack back. Rack's job is to figure out what web server to talk to and translate. Does that make sense? Cool. And rack does that with a series of middleware. So it's like a big pancake stack, or each piece of middleware, transforms the data in some way. Make sense? Cool. Plug does this too. The thing about rack, here's a technical illustration of, is rack only exists between your user and your web server. So you can only do rack things here. Once Rails gets the request, you can't use rack. Too late. Plug is cool because it eliminates that.
Plug just used for server? Actually, no, it's used for a variety of things.
It's used for a variety of things, yeah, which is super cool. Yeah. So what
this is an example of its use case.
Totally. Here we're using this kind of a module pattern to implement an adapter between our users and our web server, right? And our app. And here, this is like the thing that speaks Apache, right? But we can only use this elegant kind of module pattern where data flows to solve the problem of talking to our web server. We can't use it to solve other problems in our app. But a lot of problems we might want to solve by this. What about authentication or authorization? Wouldn't it be cool if we could just have like a module to handle that, right? What about setting headers or cookies or things like that? It'd be super cool if we had a module for that too. Plug lets us do that.
Yeah, kind of my analogy, my world, like from WordPress, way shittier than Rails, but I like a plug is like a plugin, because it's like almost like I right here, like specification for multiple modules within web applications. So
yes.
I know it has like a group of like functions, whatever.
Yes.
And it's packaged, and then you plug it in to a web app. So it's like that kind of thing is like a plugin. I don't know if it's right analogy, but that's why I'm going with now. So it's too long to me.
You know how? No, it's a good analogy. So let's change it though. You know how when you get Christmas tree lights, you can plug one end into another and chain them infinitely?
Yeah.
That.
Okay,
so it's not like plugging things into. It's not like a plug-in where it's like you're plugging in this like functionality like a USB drive.
Yeah.
That's like the WordPress plugin thing. This is like that, but it's more you're plugging in like a chain of things.
A stream.
Yeah, it's a stream. Yeah, exactly. So cool. So let's look at what you might do with plug. So why am I in? Let's open up some. This is all on GitHub. So
What's the PHX embed? Was that for like machine learning or not machine learning, but internet things or something?
no, that Phoenix embed. So this is an embed server, which serves JSON. Sorry, yeah. It serves JSON. So you know when you share something on like Facebook or something on URL and it kind of pops out with a little picture and a little like text snippet about the preview for the page. You use meta tags. Now this does that. It's basically just serves JSON about like what the photo should be in the short snippet. Cool. So in Phoenix, we have a router file that's a lot like Rails that declares the different routes our application can kind of respond to and the different pieces of code that are responsible for handling that, right? So this is basically mapping URLs to controllers, which will handle, fetch data, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense? Should be pretty clear. But the cool thing is we also have plugs and pipelines. So two concepts. We can declare arbitrary numbers of pipelines in our app. A common would be to have an API and a browser pipeline, but you can have many pipelines or one, it does not matter, right? For each group of routes, we can say we're gonna pipe through a different pipeline. This is awesome. And in the pipeline, we can compose plugs that describe transformation of the request. So this should be pretty simple, right? Pretty obvious. This is setting an accepts header, right? That's saying we're gonna accept HTML. This plug is fetching the session information from Guardian. This is fetching the flash. This is setting a CRSF token, which is a common Rails security thing. In Rails, this is done with an application helper. It's far less elegant. And here we're putting some secure browser headers in. I don't know what that does. The embed pipeline is different. This is serving JSON, and it's open to the world. So just by using plugs to compose up different pipelines and mapping those to routes, we have a huge amount of control over our application. Does that make sense? This is kind of a new idea. Like Rails does not do this. I don't think I've never seen a framework that has this idea of you're going to have routes and paths, and you're going to have different pipelines that you can slot things into, and you can compose up and share code among those pipelines simply by like writing, like just like plugging things in.
Honestly, if you don't have previous experience, it's probably easier to understand. It makes logical sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it makes tons of sense.
It's not like, oh, I meant to like hack the thing and place it over here and it's transform the magic. It's more like I get through here. There's a lot of like hiding places.
It makes sense, but I don't know anything.
But it's also already like certain part of the right.
Yeah, it's a little bit different when you do it. But just remember, like, we talked about plug, that kind of pancake module system, right? Does that make sense? Like we're defining our own stack of those modules, right? And we're saying, hey, when people ask for different parts of our app, we're going to pipe those requests through different stacks. And those stacks are just going to do different handy things, like setting response headers, all the kind of boring stuff we do as part of handling requests, HTTP requests. Cool. So one other piece of Phoenix knowledge, and then we can put all these together. But any questions about plug first, though? Any basic kind of questions? Anyone here, Jeff? Does this make sense? Hopefully it makes sense on kind of a basic level. I know I'm skipping a lot of complexity here and weird syntax, but we can get into that later. And this kind of plug stuff, like all the basic Phoenix tutorials are going to kind of go into this like basic usage of what's going on here. And this is generated, this stuff right here is actually generated when you make a new app. So I didn't like come up with all this. Cool. So add one other piece of information, the conn struct, C-O-N-N. Yeah, so this is weird for people who are not coming to this with our brains polluted by object-oriented programming. No. So in Elixir, there's two things to know. Everything's functional, right? So there's no objects that hold state. There are ways to get state in Elixir, but pretend there's no state, right? For this. Also, everything is immutable in Elixir. Once you declare a variable, you can't change it ever. You can redeclare a variable though. Okay? So if you declare x equals 5, and then you say x equals 2, no, you just have, no.
But that's like optimal. It actually made another space in memory.
Yeah, another x. You just made another x.
Yeah,
and that first x,
x.2.
yeah, it's just going to be garbage collected like later, but it's still going to be there.
Yeah, still.
Now, this doesn't come up. You don't really need to remember this on a day-to-day using Elixir.
That's the main thing. Object-oriented is mutating variable and everything, and you don't know what it is to save in the ass. Like functional programming, it's cheap. Like, you know, if it mutates something, I'll just make another copy of it.
Alright.
Yeah.
It's like actually easy. And it's an old concept from the 70s. That's just funny. It's getting popular again. It's like cycle of programming.
So forget all the Python stuff you're learning about, like changing object properties and all that JavaScript stuff. We're in functional programming land, right? So all this plug stuff and all these controllers we're going to talk about, you remember, we're defining functions that basically take data in, perform a set of transformations on the data, and output that data. That's all they do. And we're going to like chain these up to do something with. And this construct is the key to it all. These functions are going to receive a construct. They're going to do some things, and then they're going to return the construct. And in the process, that passing that construct around is how we're going to hold our state. So I said there's no state. What I kind of to qualify that, there's no like God object that like knows where we are in the request. There's one construct and one construct to rule them all, basically. And I'm new to explaining this. There's not, you make a new one every time you change it, but you can kind of think of it, these plugs as little modules that take the construct in, tweak it and change it, and then spit a new one back out. And another one grabs it and does another thing to it, right? And these are easy to test because they're really simple. And the construct holds, it's basically a big hash or a big object, you could think of it that way, that holds all the information we need to know about a request.
Yeah, it's also, con stands for, it's short for connection.
Thank you. I should have said that.
Yeah, because I see con all the time, like, what is it? Okay, I can guess what it means, but yeah, it actually does mean connection. It's the connection, the HTTP connection from the server or whatever, from the front end to your back end, and things that's your doorway. Con is the doorway.
All right.
Yeah.
So let's look at this and we'll illustrate what I'm talking about.
Have you looked into the signs yet? Con signs?
Oh yeah, we're doing a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah, con signs is awesome.
Okay, so I'm making a debugger. I'm putting a breakpoint in the code. And because I need to restart my server when usually the Phoenix has pretty good live code reloading, except not in plugs. And I just changed the plug. So let's go to my front end, which gets super is my first React project, and I get I'm always ending up breaking it because I'm always ending up like starting my server and stopping it and getting in some weird incompatible app state. Oh. There we go. Weird. So that should have pried. Bummer. Sorry, that's super weird. Yeah, cool. Oh, this isn't working the way I was hoping to. Sorry, guys. I think my demo is going to.
I usually, if you go to my the other repo called Drunken Anywhere, I
Yeah.
have like this really good list of commands. Like it's kind of like the colonoscopy. Your adversary is like cleaned everything out, and yeah, it removes all the dependencies, everything, and then resets. Whenever I have problems with that, like, you know, like I know it works. Okay. Do that.
Yeah, it's weird. Let's try it here. And if that doesn't work, I have one other idea.
Trying to shout.
Yeah, for some reason, this happened to me before, actually, and I can't remember what the problem was that I solved. So let's try it. Index.
Trying to post a command on that thing. Try. Right work.
Oh, weird. Yeah. Huh.
Dude, I like like sometimes like you copy your folder, you know, rename it or something, you know, because it does that build folder has a bunch of metadata or whatever that's next to it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I didn't know how to do that. I just can't figure. I don't think it's that. I think I'm just missing something dumb because I'm trying to do this kind of live. But thank you, though. Oh, I'm such an idiot. Yeah. Sorry, guys. But we're all going to learn something, and you guys won't make this mistake again. Okay, cool. So this is a gotcha. It gets everybody, and I've been burned by this before. If we just run our server, we can't pry.
Oh,
You got to do it this special way.
oh.
So don't be me. Here we go.
There you go. Command up.
Yep. And if we give it this trace thing, we should be able to. Cool. Okay. We have pride inside a plug. And we're going to just look at con. This is the construct. And you can see it has a lot of information. We have this assigns thing that we'll talk about. Look, we have the params. all this information about the path. There's a thing called private, where we have some Guardian stuff, which was our authentication, our JSON web token. All kinds of interesting stuff here. Also the action, the API, everything that we need to describe the entirety of the HTTP request we have in this big con thing that we are passing around through all these modules.
That's really awesome. And you can use con assigns, or you just add more into it. Your packet, and then it's immediately available to your JavaScript from it. It's really awesome.
That's cool. I haven't even gotten there. So that's exactly what we're going to do. If we can get, so look at the construct, what we have. We have the user on here, right? We have the controller action. We have everything about the request that we need to decide if we need to authorize it or not. So we can simply write a plug that takes in a construct, looks inside that struct to see if all the pieces are right, and if not, halts, and if so, passes it on. Does that make sense? Everything was, we just need to do a little bit of work to move some pieces around of the construct around. And this is why plug is so cool. Yeah.
I hate to ask this question. I'm like kind of confused on the term. Like, what does struct mean exactly? Is that just like the like just in the book they use that term a lot more. I'm kind of curious, like, what is the definition?
It's like a formal map, I think. So
okay.
Yeah, it's like a map with a
data or whatever, structural.
Yeah, so you could so a map is like a hash.
Yeah.
And a struct is like a named map, I think, basically. Okay. Yeah. They're more formal maps, yeah. So yeah, okay. So that's yeah, big hash. Used for
a big hash.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of reinforce this. So because of the elegance of the plug and the functional nature of Elixir and this construct thing, we can write an authorization framework that is simply a plug. It's just simply another step in the process. We don't need to do any other work. We don't need to have any magic, any DSLs. We don't need to have any independent like policy things. All really easy. And we can leverage one other really cool aspect of Elixir that I'll show you in a minute to make it happen. So first we have to do a little bit of homework. We have to, what do we need to do the authorization, right? We need to know the current user, and we need to know the thing that they're trying to like look at, right? Cool. So let's get all that on the struct. So system built annoy. Already have that open. So the first plug I wrote is not this one. It's this one. I'm using Guardian, like I said, to do my authentication, which means Guardian knows about my current user. And Guardian is putting that information on the struct, in the struct, of course, right? And it's putting it in this under this key called private. And private is reserved for library usage, right? So if I want to get figure out who my user is, I could just go look private. But the problem is, let's say I change and I don't use Guardian anymore. I'd have to rewrite this code. That would suck. So that's one thing. So I decided that I wanted to first write a plug that put my current user in a normal standard place that I could always look at it regardless of what I was doing for authentication. And I used our good old friend plug assign to do that. In plug, the assigns key is the place where you as a user can throw stuff. So this function right here just takes, well, so hold on, so back up. So a module plug right here has two methods, one init, which is just boilerplate, and then one called call. And this is actually what's called when the plug is invoked. So here's where you write the code that does stuff. We're getting the construct passed in as an argument, of course, right? That should be obvious, hopefully, at this point. To know how this thing works, it has to have the construct, and it has to return a construct. Also, this underscore means we're getting a second argument to this method, but we don't care what it is. And this underscore thing is common in programming across languages.
But it's part of the same word, isn't it?
What's that?
The underscore is part of the same word. Is that?
Part of the same word?
Yeah. Gordian. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about that one. I was sorry.
No.
Yeah, I thought you were pointing at Gordian.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, it's right here. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, it means like, yeah, wildcard, we don't care. You will see in a minute why this is important. But and so then we're going to call an assign function again. That's going to take that construct again. It's going to take the key under which we want to put the new data and the new data. So let's see if we can pry in here and see what it is. I always do that.
That's one. Do you know what AUV means in the Gordian ecosystem?
What is it?
AUV. It's right up there. The Gordian authentication.
Where?
And their terminal is there.
Am I here? Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, let me know if you see it again. So let's look at what this plug does here. Ignore this C stack trace garbage. Cool. So I'm just going to copy and paste this in, and let's see if this will work. Yay, cool. Okay, so look at the construct.
Guardian default claims.
Guardian default claims. Yeah.
What does that mean? What is that? It's right there. Up to right there.
I have no idea. Yeah, no idea.
Yeah, is it Australian?
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah. Anyway, so check it out. So we're in this right here. We got the construct, and notice there's nothing. There's nothing on here that's in assigns, right? And then we're going to call this method, and we're going to assign a new con to it. And our new con now has our user in the assigns key. Does that make sense what this is doing? If you were in object-oriented land, let me rewrite this in JavaScript. This is fun. Oh, that's Ruby. I said JavaScript, right? Cool. That's how you would write it in an object-oriented language.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, to me, this is the biggest challenge with Elixir, is the simple stuff functionally. Like, it just takes me a little bit to change my brain.
Yeah, it is different.
Yeah, it's like, okay, the function passing two arguments, one the key, another the value. But this should be pretty straightforward, right? So we have a plug, and what I'm doing is I'm reaching into the construct, I'm taking this Guardian default resource out of it, and I'm throwing it on assigns user, which is normal and standard and where everybody expects it to be. Boring so far, but useful to do, right? Cool. Okay, so now I've got the user on the construct. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm like really excited. Like, yeah, user. Now we have to do one more thing. We need to tell the construct about the resource that we're trying to authorize. Almost all authorization frameworks tie this resource to the resource being manipulated. Like if you, let's say we have a, let's say we make an app to manage warehouse inventories or warehouses, right? And let's say we have many customers and each customer has an invoice, has many invoices, right? If we want to decide whether a user can update a customer record, we're going to see if the user should have access to that customer's records, right? Let's say if we want to decide if a user can view an invoice, how do we figure that out? And let's say each customer has many users accounts. So these users are logging in at our customer sites and they want to pull up an invoice. How do we make sure that they don't see their competitors across towns invoices? And compare that to what?
To the ID, user ID of the invoice.
You could do that. So that's one option, right? So here we have a company, and then we have invoices, right? Like anyway, you get the, and then we have a user. So we can compare the user to the invoice. But here's the thing: we probably want to compare it to the company.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, right? But the problem is, if you're looking at the show action, the invoices controller, most authorization libraries are going to force you to look at the invoice somehow. But you don't really care what invoice. Well, they're going to make you look at the invoice and not the customer record. Because really, you just want to make sure that all the users for a given customer can view all the invoices in that customer. That's what you care about. So I decided to have to explicitly tell the framework what record we are using for authorization, not deduce it from the controller route. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I could just be like, okay, well, we're just going to authorize whatever action, whatever action that we're, the invoices act, whatever. So I could just sort of deduce what record we want to use based on the route and the thing that we are manipulating. But I want to make it explicit. So here we have another plug, one that takes arguments this time. It takes arguments as a map. And this is a bit interesting. It takes two things. It takes the resource and the resource ID. And it's a little bit easier to show you how this works. Oh, it might be. Yeah, cool. So we have a resource ID. What is that? It's a 2. And we're getting it from the param section of the con. Cool. And the argument. Oh shoot! I reassigned that. Well, okay. Cool. So the resource we're getting passed in. This is basically the name of the database table or the model, right? And we're getting the ID. And then if we don't have the ID, I'm assigning an empty struct to this so I don't have a nil error. And if I get an ID, then the first thing I want to do is make an integer out of it. And this is where Elixir gets kind of interesting. I have to use the integer parse function and pass a string in. Notice this is the string right here because it's coming from the request parameters, which are all strings. So this gives me an integer, and then I can use my repo.get function. I can pass in the name, the class, and the resource ID, and get an actual database object out of it.
Also, we're going to parse the integer as a way for the data. So then putting like.
Oh, I didn't know that. That wasn't what I was thinking about, actually.
scripting and packaging.
It would be a SQL injection attack,
Yeah,
actually.
something like that, yeah. Yeah.
Is it JavaScript?
Yeah.
So yeah, that you parse it.
Yeah, I would be careful about using it for that side effect, and I didn't know it did that. I mean, here I'm doing it because this function needs an integer.
Yeah.
This won't work with a string.
Yeah.
And this is where like Python and JavaScript would just happily take a string and figure it out. Yeah. Sorry, can you guys hear okay? Okay, cool. This is also interesting. This gets into a bit of Elixir called pattern matching. But the point is that this variable is being assigned to the output of this function. Does that make sense? Can I just say that and everybody understands?
Yeah.
But I definitely encourage you to look into that.
Is that underscore S?
No, this is actually this is like the message it's returning. So this is returning a tuple, where the first part of the tuple is the parse integer and the second is like okay, and I just don't want to match against that. And then, so now I've got everything, and now I do the same thing that we saw on the other plug. I throw it on the construct. So at the end of this, I have I have the user and the resource on the construct in the same assigns area. Does that make sense? And let's look at this code. So we have a resource ID. So let's parse it real quick. Okay, cool.
Crystal Board is the creator of work, and Joseph Bonnie is the creator of it. Yeah, and it's like straight to
Cool. Yeah, that's a good book.
everything you need to know. It's a lot of fun too. Get there. It's the next one.
Okay.
Oh, also, I mean, it's from it's nice, said that a lot. It's like, should I read it first and then go through the examples, But it's nice. I don't know if you felt that situation, whether read it first, and then read it again and do the examples.
Yeah.
I recommend going through this and doing it as you go.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said that it was for backend.
Yeah, it's for back, but it's new front end stuff too.
Oh, yeah?
Definitely full stack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You might have to wait like a year or two to submit.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Well, I want to keep going so that Jeff can, yeah. Cool. So we you can see we've got the resource here, and then we're just assigning it to a new place on the struct. Cool. And now in assigns we have both the user and the authorizing resource. One of the drawbacks for this is I'm making in a lot of cases, I'm going to be making 2 database round trips. Yeah, thanks, man. And I'm not really sure how to get around that. Well, so here I'm going and getting the resource from the database, and a lot of times I might be getting that resource again later. So I'm not. So I'm making a double database call, and I haven't solved that problem yet. But anyway, so 2 plugs that end up with our prepared struct now. We've got, where are we? We've got the authorizing resource, and we've got user. And we also have a bunch of other stuff that was given to us already by Phoenix, including the controller and the action. So now we have everything we need to write an authorization function. And this is where we get to do some cool Elixir things. So let's look at the actual authorizing plug. Oh, one more thing I forgot. How I'm actually using these plugs, the assign guardian user plug, the one to just move the user to the accessible place, I just put that in the pipeline, so every request gets that. The other ones have to be called on a per controller basis. So here's the assign authorizing resource plug. And you can see that I'm just passing in the arguments. The first argument con gets supplied, and the second one I pass in, and I just put this basically in every controller, and then also I just put my authorization plug in the controller. In Phoenix, you can declare plugs in controllers or in your pipeline. Yeah, and that's why it's super cool. It's super nice.
A lot of flexibility for schools. That's what they're just like, you're just using.
They're just simple. Yeah, they're simple. They're well defined. And we have one call, and this is where it gets interesting, I think. We're doing a couple of things here. First, we're doing the Elixir pipe, which is a lot like the Unix pipe. And what this is doing is it's taking the output of the first section of the pipe and passing it as the first argument to the second function. So this is doing this. It is a little bit more idiomatic to do it that way, although I'm looking at the style. This could be this. I'm inconsistent. Does that make sense? It's a little bit weird to just have the thing return itself. Like this normally would be a function that would return con. You see this in change sets.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. But it's super cool because you can do it all the time. Like I do it in tests.
So it's like change sets are your go-to tool for you need to change that.
Let's see. Oh, I thought I would have done it in the tests. There are tests for all these plugs too in the repo. Okay, cool. So anyway, the point is then we call a private function and we pass 3 arguments: the con, struct itself, the controller, and the action. And then we write a separate function definition for each case that we care about. So here are all of the ones for the site controller. This function definition body will be called when when the arguments match these two things. This is a really awesome part of Elixir, which pattern matching and function definitions. So this variable will match anything because con is not defined in this context. It'll match anything being passed in. And I could do this, let's say, controller, and that would match anything passed in as a second argument and assign it to the controller variable like every other sane language in the universe. This changes it. If I don't pass in this exact thing as the second argument, which comes from here, this function definition body is not going to be applied, and it's going to look for another function definition that matches, and so on and so forth. If it doesn't find anything up here, it's going to hit this one, which matches, these underscores match anything. So on 100% of the time, if you call this plug, it's going to, at a minimum, hit this. So if you mess this up, there's a typo, so there's a safe default, it defaults to shutting everything down all the time. So we're basically whitelisting specific argument combinations. Yeah. This, I think, is really cool. This ability to have multiple function definitions is really cool. Function definitions can both do pattern matching, but they can also do the number of arguments. So we can have, it just happens that all these function definitions take 3 arguments, but I could make one that took 2, and that would be a completely separate function clause that would only match 2 arguments being applied. And this is a big gotcha with Elixir and Phoenix because, like Erlang, function definitions include the arity, so they include the number of arguments. So like in Ruby or JavaScript, or like most languages, you have a function, and it's like my first name function. And it just, and if you pass it too many or not enough arguments, you're going to get like an argument error, right?
Yeah.
not in Elixir or Erlang. You get a no method error. So let's say you have a method called first name or like greeting that takes a string and returns hi, nice person, right? And let's say you gave it no arguments. In Ruby, so in JavaScript, it would still execute and blow up. In Ruby, you get an argument error. It's like expected one argument, got none.
Yeah.
In Elixir, you get a no method error, no function clause matching first name /1. Have you noticed the function names in the book all have a slash at the end of it?
Yeah, and also like a 1 or a 2.
Yeah, that's the number of arguments that function takes, and it's part of the actual function definition. That's why we include it in the name.
I always wonder, like slash and like 2 or things like, okay, it's like the second, like, is there 2 of these functions?
Yes.
But no, that makes sense.
And there might be
I
more.
think, like, there's like 2 definitions of that function.
Yes.
But no, you're saying there's like 2, there's passed in 2 arguments or something like that.
What that's saying is that this
Or
function,
it's like,
yeah, it's saying that the definition of this function is a function with this name that takes 2 arguments.
okay.
If you change the name, it's a different function, and if you change the arguments, it's a different function.
Yeah.
So you could have a function with the same name.
Yeah.
You could have 10 functions all have the same name and just differ in the number of arguments they take. Which means though, if you supply the wrong number of arguments, you will get a no method error or no function error. Which is confusing because you tend to think, oh, that's not defined. Did I not include that file? Is there a typo? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's like, oh. But most of the time, it's because I'm not supplying an argument that it needs. So that's a really big gotcha. So this function right here is the name of this bat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I wanted to write documentation or communicate to you about the code, I would do authorize /4. And authorize 3 is a different function.
Can you go back to the code?
Yep.
Oh, that's authorized.
All of these take, I'm sorry,
Okay.
they 3, I'm sorry, authorize 3.
Okay, yeah.
They all take 3 arguments.
Okay, so all those would be authorized 3.
So all these are the same function, there's multiple clauses.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I wrote this, this would be another function. There'd be 2 functions defined here. 1 function, 2 functions. Because this is authorized /2.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Also, the P is a private.
Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, private.
Private. Yep. So what we're doing is we're supplying a function definition that matches based on. So this looks a lot like Pundit or that code I showed you earlier, right?
Yeah.
And then we're basically doing 1 of 2 things that I wrote. Either we're authorizing by the resource, which basically looks to see if my user IDs match. And if so, I don't do anything in the plug, but I simply just flip a little Boolean on the con. And then if it doesn't, I blow it up. I halt the connection and everything dies. Gracefully with a 403. And that's it. And then sometimes I just want to assign it no matter what, like creating a site. If you're logged in, you can create a new site. You know, like I don't know, you can make as many records as you want. Right? So as long as I got another plug that checks to see if you're logged in, so I don't even have to worry about that here. So I can just be like, yep, I've done it. And then I have one final plug. Where is it? I need to get better with my so the question is, what happens if you forget to if you F up? So let's say you create a new action for your site and you forget to write a function definition clause for your thing, right? Let's say we add an endpoint to the site controller, delete, and we forget to write a function clause for that because we're in a hurry. Well, no worries. I mean, it'll just, it'll just kill it. Right? You won't open up a security hole without knowing it. Awesome. But let's say you add a whole new controller and you forget to call the plug in the first place. Whoops. Right? Well, I have one final check. Oh, this needs to be in, I have one final plug that you can use that will basically raise an error if you haven't flipped the authorization perform Boolean. And where is it? This is really ugly. I want to raise this. In Elixir, errors have the same name as the modules. And you define, or exceptions, and you define the exceptions up here as like module attributes. This is weird.
Errors have the same definitions of modules.
Yeah, so I'm raising an exception here,
Yeah.
and it's defined here. But to raise it, I just call this name, which happens to be the name of the module. See that?
If you use like error message,
It's right here.
oh. Yeah. That's sorry.
Yeah, it's a reasonable way to do things.
I didn't see ready for rescue.
Oh, really?
No,
Yeah. So this is try rescue. So anything in here throws an exception. I will rescue it.
is that in Rails?
This is a common JavaScript has begin catch.
I've seen try and catch. I haven't seen raise.
In Ruby it's well, so raise is something else. So don't worry about raise. It's try and rescue in Elixir. It's try, catch, and begin and rescue in Ruby.
I think it's try and catch.
Yeah. So here we have try rescue. Yeah.
That's
Oh yeah, no, oh, terrible. So the reason I have to do this though is because I'll get a key error if in some cases if I don't have the authorization perform key on the assigns struct, I'll get an error. So I have to rescue that. So this is really ugly. So if I don't have the authorization performed field at all, I'm going to assume we didn't do the authorization. And if it's there and it's false, I'm also going to assume we didn't do the authorization. So this needs refactored. Now I'm thinking about it, but it does the trick. Yeah, it definitely does need refactoring. I should initialize this so it's always there, and then I can avoid this check. And also, I should put this in my router because I want this to be. I don't want to have to remember. So I'm worried about making a new controller. I don't think I should have to remember to add in authorization. I think once you insert it into your app, forgetting should result in no. You should never be able to open up a security hole by not doing something.
Yeah.
Right? You shouldn't have to remember to include the authorization. Yeah, totally. Under all circumstances. Yeah. And this is secure by default as long as you in each controller, and yeah, put this in. So this isn't doing anything, but if I move this to the router file, then even if I add whole new controllers,
Yeah.
I'm still safe because it'll throw out the error. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. This is dumb. So cool. Well, that's pretty much it, and it comes to the target end time. So
there's no Elixir Phoenix meetups. It seems like a whole scene still on Rails.
there are some Erlang meetups.
Yeah, early meetups.
There's like most of the people are Elixir people that are Erlang meetups I found.
What's that?
So I have two things I found, and I think this is common for people. Like, I can read Erlang code now, no problem. There's a couple of syntax things that are weird, but like, because the concepts are the hard part, I think. The syntax in Erlang, I actually don't see. I'm really glad I learned Elixir because it came really fast, or it didn't come fast, it came faster. But also, it was like the syntax maps pretty closely. So you can like read Elixir code or Erlang code and be like, oh, cool. And the most important thing, though, I think, is because Erlang and Elixir just have a very fundamentally different way of doing things. The architecture choices are the interesting thing. I went to an Erlang meetup, which was scaling. This guy was doing 250,000 requests a second with like payloads of 10 megabytes. And he talked about how he did a distributed setup with Erlang, and it would be identical if he had used Elixir. Absolutely identical. I could read the code. The problems he described were the same problems. The solutions were the same solutions. And almost everybody in the room, it was interesting. The two things were everybody, like I was one of the younger people in the room, which is really rare. Yeah. Most of it.
Extremely smart though.
Oh yeah, no, it was super.
Way they're like doing this right.
Yeah, it was awesome. A member of the Erlang core team was there. No, they're Francesco there. Anyway, it's super. So I found that I could read Erlang, and if you just like open your horizons to like Elixir and Erlang, there's a lot of people who have been using Erlang like quietly for a long time, and they're super smart and super cool. And I would be, So that's why I think there's not much Elixir meetups, because I think in the city, those people are probably just going to the Erlang meetups.
I think that one of the best friends Erlang, and then people who build stuff in the future are still.
Yeah, totally. It's not hip and hot enough, I think, to have like a meetup with like 300 people coming. Like that's like the JavaScript meetups.
Yeah, and this is kind of like, I think Elixir is way cooler, or Phoenix looks way cooler than I mean, they're apples and oranges, but.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
it's catching on, but I mean, it's like, the JavaScript is still, properly like really interesting and hot. Lots of cool stuff happening there.
Yeah.
A lot of energy, a lot of, and also like, people go to these things because they network, they learn stuff. And, Elixir and Erlang are a little bit more novelties still. I mean, I'm not using this in my day job. Not many people are.
It's all fun.
Yeah, I mean,
I can get JSON on it.
Yeah, I mean,
add application and all that, and that's all I needed.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, fortunately, unfortunately, in this case, I mean, I'm not to the point yet where. Also, like most of the stuff I build, I hand off to other people, or I'm coming in for augmentation. So it's like,
they're gonna have a developer.
Yeah, and so I would want the client to sign off on, like, I wouldn't want to just make this decision myself, because when it inevitably comes back to like be painful, as all decisions are. You know what I mean? Because if I choose Rails and we hit a rough spot, like how can, no one's going to criticize that. Like, it's like, extremely mature, bulletproof, well thought out framework that unless going into it, you need to scale to 10,000 requests a second on day one, you better build your thing in it and like worry about scaling later. So there's, no one's going to really contest that. Like at this point, I think choosing right now, in my opinion, like choosing Phoenix is a little bit of a premature optimization, but I think that's going to go away like really, really fast. But I mean, I think it's things like how do you do a pagination, right? Like, oh, you got to paginate your thing. Well, you got to bill your client another $4,000 to re-implement pagination. They're not going to be pleased about that. You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. Yeah, and it's like, what about file attachments? In Rails, your client says, I want you to be able to upload a PDF and a Shockwave Flash file and nothing else. Like, done, sir. That'd be $400. And Elixir is like, that'll be a week. So you really like, but people are building this, like everyday stuff comes out, test framework got so much better. It's happening so fast. I think in a year, I think it'd be completely different. And I think that, like, I get into arguments with people at work. They're like, Phoenix and perimeter optimization, you should choose, Rails is safe. There needs to be don't over-engineer and make sure there's a compelling use case for it. But here's the thing. All those arguments were true of Rails when Rails was new. Like because the choice used to be basically PHP or Rails. Like say circa 2007. And people say the same thing. Well, like, why would you, only choose Rails if you know you have a problem that Rails solves, otherwise stick to good old PHP.
Yeah.
And at some point that changed and Rails became the default, safe, boring choice. I think Phoenix is going to be not default, safe, and boring, but I think it's going to be a very compelling default choice really soon.
Yeah.
Because I think these like trivial.
That Yahoo embed, they're
Yeah.
set for internet things, for that.
Yeah, I think it'll be. There's going to be a lot of really interesting things.
And the
So.
documentation is great too.
Yes.
That right there makes it.
Yeah, the documentation is great.
Right there, it's all right there.
Yep, community is great. People are like, the.
It's so damn friendly, man. Like
Yep.
Christopher Ford
Yeah.
and Jose Baldwin.
Yep.
I swear to lovers, man.
Well, it's funny. I was writing on Slack today. If you look in Stack Overflow, about 50% of the Elixir questions have Josie himself answering.
Yeah, or
which is amazing.
Or Gasser on Stack Overflow.
Oh, okay. There's another guy. Yeah, he's like one guy. Well, yeah.
Every single
Everything.
Oh, I have a chain set.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that group seems really cool.
All right, so I'm going to wrap up if it's okay with you. I need to. Normally I would do a little bit later, but I got to get going. So,
I've been reading this book since Friday.
looks like we got Josh at home. Josh, I hope you had a good time. I will send you a note, man. Oh, hey, thanks, dude. Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Sure. I don't know, man. I'm down to go host a meetup or something.
Cool. Are you in the city or East Bay?
Yeah, I'm in the city. Yeah. So yeah, if you're ever down.